Dr. Elizabeth Johnson is the Assistant Dean of Student Success at the Lincoln Memorial University College of Veterinary Medicine. Dr. Johnson earned a Bachelor of Science in Animal Science from the University of Tennessee in 2012 and earned her DVM degree from the University of Tennessee College of Veterinary Medicine in 2016. As an undergraduate student, Dr. Johnson worked for the University of Tennessee as a university ambassador, sparking her love of working in a university setting. While in veterinary school, Dr. Johnson worked for the University of Tennessee Office of Undergraduate Admissions as a graduate assistant, where she supervised tour guides, oversaw weekly staff meetings, maintained tour schedules, coordinated group and VIP tours, mediated conflict, worked in the UT Visitor Center, and assisted with UT open houses and preview days where attendance was typically in excess of 3,000 prospective students and families per event. Dr. Johnson was also a veterinary student representative for Elanco and Novartis Animal Health and was active in the Student American Veterinary Medical Association, or SAVMA, as an elected delegate. Beginning in March of 2015, Dr. Johnson also served a 2-year term as Veterinary Economics Officer for the American Veterinary Medical Association after being elected to this national leadership position by the SAVMA House of Delegates. As a Veterinary Economics Officer, Dr. Johnson worked closely with the AVMA Economics Division and Executive Board to evaluate economic challenges faced by students and veterinarians. She advocated for students to the AVMA, the Association of American Veterinary Medical Colleges, and the U.S. Legislature to assess the impact of student loan debt, rising interest rates on federal student loans, and tuition costs. And she promoted personal finance education as a standard among veterinary college curricula. During that time, Dr. Johnson co-authored an article for DVM 360 entitled, "Can We Quantify the True Cost of Veterinary Student Debt?" It was through these leadership and professional development experiences outside of the classroom that Dr. Johnson found her love for mentoring veterinary students through the ups and downs of vet school. Before accepting her current position as Assistant Dean of Student Success, Dr. Johnson worked as a small animal general practice veterinarian at a private practice in Texas. In her spare time, Dr. Johnson enjoys traveling, hiking with her 2 Labrador retrievers, spin classes, and spending time with her boyfriend, AJ, friends, and family. Well, welcome to the show, Dr. Elizabeth Johnson, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so honored and excited to have this conversation with you.
And the honor is mine. Before we get started, I know that you just got back from the AAVMC conference, and I thought before I forget, just ask you a little bit about that. What was it about, and what did you do there? And
Sure. So for those who aren't aware, veterinary medicine is filled with acronyms. We love our acronyms. I'm sure you understand that. So whenever I work with my students, I always try to take a moment to pause and remind them what it stands for. So AAVMC is the American Association of Veterinary Medical Colleges. And that is basically the overseeing association, overseeing body for all of the accredited veterinary colleges within the United States and then some that are international. So the annual conference is really just a gathering of administrators and some higher level faculty to get together. There's seminars, there's lectures, there's breakout groups. I participated in the AVMC Diversity Committee breakout session one morning. That's led by Dr. Lisa Greenhill. She's fantastic. So it's basically kind of the convergence of all the different colleges and lots of really good content. And it takes place usually in and around Washington, D.C., so that's really fun. And it's really neat to kind of see all these different perspectives and brilliant people in one place at one time.
Absolutely. I mean, it's like a way for all the different veterinary colleges to stay on the same page and exchange ideas and say, like if somebody's experimenting with an innovative program in their curriculum, they can talk about it.
Exactly.
Can anybody go to these conferences, or do you have to be invited?
That's an excellent question. As far as AVMC goes, I'm pretty sure that the invitation is limited to individuals that are coming from specific colleges or, special guests. But I encourage any veterinarian, especially any veterinary student, to attend as many conferences as you can. I think that that's super important. And I say that, and in case any of my students are listening, one of the things I'm in charge of here is the absences and attendance policy. So if they go, make sure that you're following proper protocol and not missing anything important in your courses. But as far as AAVMC goes, to answer your question, I think that that's pretty much limited just to school administrators. So,
well, still really interesting to know. I didn't even know that was a thing, but of course it is, and as it should be.
Right. Absolutely.
So I usually start the interview by asking, when in your life did you decide that you wanted to be a vet and why?
Yeah, I love that question. You get such a variety of answers whenever you ask students this. And whenever I help with our prospective student interviews, we ask that too. And that you get so many cool answers. So my dad is an MD, a human physician, human doctor, as I tell people who are in veterinary medicine. He's an internist, and my mom is a medical laboratory technology specialist turned high school biology teacher. She went back and got her master's whenever we were growing up. And so growing up, I think that we always had a great, science foundation just from that. Right. And I think that I inherited my dad's bedside manner and love for helping people and love for nurturing. And growing up, my dad would take my sister and I on house calls. He would still go on house calls for patients who were homebound, like special situations. Right. I grew up in a very small rural town in East Tennessee in the mountains, and it's beautiful and economically disadvantaged, and people from all sorts of different backgrounds. And that was just, I didn't realize it then, that was a very humbling experience. So whenever I was trying to decide what I wanted to do, whenever I grow up, I was very active as a kid and as a teenager with 4-H. It was very, very impressionable. All of the public speaking experience and the animal handling. And it was phenomenal. Really, really good program. I'm very thankful for that. So that kind of sparked my interest and my initial love for animals. And then whenever I went to college, I was like, okay, well, I think I'm going to go to medical school or veterinary school. And I started working as an assistant in the kennel worker at a veterinary clinic, a small animal clinic in my hometown. And I was just fascinated, like these veterinarians do all the different things in one building. My dad, who's an internist, does one thing. He doesn't deliver babies. He doesn't do surgery.
Exactly.
But these veterinarians, they are surgeons and internists, and they have the pharmacy in house. And it was just, it really sparked something within me. And those guys there are still very, very just impressionable mentors on me in my career, and I've always gone back and consulted with them if I'm in the middle of a big decision. And so I think that kind of started it, and was pre-vet pretty much all through college, and got in thankfully on my first cycle. I was lucky enough to have a in-state vet school. So yeah.
Wow. I love that story.
One of my favorite things, as I progressed through my veterinary school experience and had more of an understanding and a foundation. And then whenever I was in practice, is I love to talk shop with my dad. I love to sit down and be like, my dad will tell me like, well, with this case, I had a congestive heart failure patient. And I was like, hey, I did too. And this is what I did. And he's like, wait, you do that in your patients? I'm like, yeah, we do.
Right.
So, yeah.
Oh my gosh, it's so neat. And so you grew up and you were able to see both sides of medicine, human medicine versus veterinary medicine. And
absolutely,
you got to choose, the one that you felt had more variety and interest.
For sure. My dad worked extremely hard and worked a lot growing up. So my mom thankfully was able to be home with us, but seeing how hard he worked, and I don't think it was as much of a buzzword, in the 80s and 90s, but the idea of work-life balance. He was doing stress tests and seeing patients and doing nursing home rounds, and he was on call. I mean,
Wow.
it was incredible. And I think now that's not the case. And I have to say that I'm thankful, just from the perspective of both veterinary medicine and for medicine in general, that we're transitioning away from one person being all things to all people. It's not sustainable. So
No, not at all. Yeah. And then you mentioned in previous communications that we've had that during your first year of veterinary school, you had a scare with your parents and they had some health issues and it was very upsetting for you. What?
yeah, absolutely. I think I described to you. It was just sort of everybody has their high points and their low points in vet school and life in general. And that was certainly, kind of a low point for me. And I look back and I think it also gave me a ton of perspective. But in the spring semester of my first year of veterinary school, within about 6 weeks of each other, my dad and my mom both had cancer scares. I'll never forget. I woke up with my mom in the hospital after surgery on my birthday that year. And I didn't make super good grades my first semester in vet school. And then whenever I was trying to rebound from that in my second semester, that was just kind of an added insult. And I tell people that I leaned on my support system and my friends and my classmates, and I limped to the finish line. And I was pretty sure, I was like, if I survive this in terms of, the program, and if I was considering, do I need to withdraw? Do I need to come back? It was just, it made me kind of zoom out and see the bigger picture. Mm-hmm. So it was scary. They're both doing well now, and I'm very thankful for that. A lot of people don't have those good outcomes, but my dad ended up retiring early because of it. And it was just a big transition time, and that was hard.
Well, I'm glad they're doing fine now. But so in your first semester of veterinary school, this is before you had the scare with your mother.
Right.
When you first started, what did you think? How did you feel about it? You mentioned that your grades weren't all that great. Did you struggle or were you just...
Oh yeah, I definitely struggled. I think it was just, I call it with my students now, like stiff upper lip syndrome. I was not doing well. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, I do.
I wasn't doing well, but I knew my friends were. And I was just like, okay, well, this is just a transition, and I'm eventually I'm going to get it. And I sort of did. But never in my first year, there was never an aha moment, which is, I look back now, and that's some pretty important foundation. So, like I said, I just I limped along and thankfully passed. And, second year, third year was substantially better. But I think first year for me, I wasn't sure I belonged there. There was a lot of imposter syndrome. And then again, I just didn't understand, and I didn't know how to be vulnerable to the fact that I'm not doing that great, but the people around me are. And at Tennessee, it's a small class size. So
how many?
I graduated with 79.
Oh, okay. Wow.
I think we started in the upper 80s, which is small now.
Oh, so quite a few people didn't make it.
Yeah, for different circumstances, and I think that's fairly common. Some attrition, I'm learning is common. Hopefully, a small amount, but I just the small class size was great because everybody knew everybody, but it also made it harder. So
yeah, there's some peer pressure. And did you have did you have study groups?
Yeah, and I think that was a part of the struggle. Is maybe I wasn't as grounded in those groups, or maybe I kept trying to find new groups. It's just it's such a huge point of transition. I keep using that word, but it was also interesting because I went to the University of Tennessee for undergrad as well. So I tell people I went to UT. I'm a lifer. I went to UT for both of my degrees. Yeah. So I graduated from college, and then I walked across the street to the vet school and spent 4 more years there. But it was sort of like, okay, well, do you study with the same people that you studied with in college? Do you branch out? Do you find new people? And that took me long. I'm not sure that I was a strong enough student to get to that point. to be like, okay, well, this is my study group and I know exactly what I need to do and go, like, hit the ground running. I'm not sure that I had that foundation whenever I started vet school. So.
Right. Oh, it's so difficult. And I remember, like, when you get there, it is small. It's like high school all over again. Everybody knows everybody. And there's a lot. I remember feeling like, am I as smart as these people?
Right.
Maybe I'm stupid compared to them, and I don't want anybody to know that. And being in like anatomy lab with people and them talking about different concepts and just feeling very intimidated, like, oh, I don't know if I'm actually good enough, and just feeling afraid to speak freely.
Right.
I remember that.
Yeah, I'm sure you do, especially since I think, correct me if I'm wrong, you were a non-traditional student. So you came in and you had all this life experience, and this was sort of a second career for you. So I cannot fathom what you went through. It was a completely different type of imposter syndrome, right? But yeah, it was an interesting experience. I'm glad I survived it, and I gained a lot of perspective from that. And I've been reading a lot. Are you familiar with Dr. Brene Brown? Does that author?
Yeah.
Okay.
Daring Greatly was one
exactly.
of her,
and she just has a new book called Braving the Wilderness, I think is what it's called. It's phenomenal. But a lot of her work centers on the idea of vulnerability in academia and lack thereof.
Yes.
And I'm just fascinated by it. And I think that everything she talks about is so relevant to our profession.
Oh my gosh, true.
And if I could go back to Elizabeth, first year of veterinary school, and if I'm not sure that TED Talks were that popular then, if I could just be like, Elizabeth, like, watch this TED Talk and be vulnerable with your peers about what you're going through, I would have benefited greatly. So in my job now, I try to really encourage my students who are having a hard time due to different reasons. It's not just academic, just to be vulnerable with your friends, rally your friends around you, and you'll be better off for it,
Right. Oh, fantastic advice. And I definitely think that people listening should pick up those books, both of them.
Oh, it's even if you don't like reading, her videos. Get the audiobook. Exactly. Or her videos are hilarious. Like I show them a lot with my students, and I'm a huge fan. I'm kind of the Brene Brown nerd. So
awesome. So I will put a link to her TED Talk in the show notes for this.
Thank you. Perfect.
Thank you. So back to first year and the trouble that you were having, you also mentioned to me that you saw a therapist at University of Tennessee College of Veterinary Medicine, and she's actually a PhD in veterinary social work. And I talked to Dr. Zini Eng, and I know you know him.
Absolutely.
Everybody seems to know him. It's amazing.
He's awesome.
People from all over the country, after I posted that interview, was like, I love him. Like, how does everybody know him? But anyway, so he and I talked about that program and Dr. Elizabeth Strand. So you actually sought help from her when you were
absolutely. And I look back and I want to, again, looking back to first year Elizabeth, I want to be like, okay, well, you should have been a little bit more proactive about this. But I didn't start utilizing the counseling sessions that we were able to do basically for free. It was part of our tuition, if you want to call that free. I didn't start going to see her until I was in my second year. And I will tell you, I'll tell anyone, I tell my students, if it hadn't been for her and the perspective I gained talking to her, I'm not sure I would have graduated vet school. She is just phenomenal. I tell people that she's my spirit animal. Like, I just want to, everything that she is, I want to channel it, which will never happen. We have very different personality types. So if she's listening, she's probably laughing. But I just consider her a friend, and I am so thankful that she is at UT for students like me and for all of the other students that she's worked with and the faculty and the staff. I mean, she is just phenomenal. And one of the biggest things that she taught me in our sessions, I would go about once a month, was that she basically asked me, she was like, where do you bloom? Which I think is a really beautiful question. And I pause there because pausing is important, but it's something that we all need to kind of think about. Like, where do you bloom? Is it in an exam room, across from a client? Is it, writing books? Is it, working with, in a laboratory setting and research, like where do you bloom? And she asked me at one point, when was the last time you felt really proud of yourself? I'll never forget that question. And I told her, it was whenever I ran for the veterinary economics officer on our SAVMA executive board, the national SAVMA board. And I gave a speech that I was just really passionate about. And that was the last time that I really felt like proud. People came up to me and they were like, hey, like that really spoke to me. And I was like, all right, well, maybe I'm not bad at that. Maybe I can, help empower people through what I do. So working with Dr. Strand just really opened my eyes to the fact that I don't bloom necessarily in the classroom. I don't bloom like a typical veterinary student. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the further away I get from vet school, the more I realize that there's very little correlation between how well you did on your exams and how good of a doctor you are. It's
right.
Completely different.
Yeah. I tell students, I'm like, you need to do well enough, whatever that means for you. Success means different things to different people. And then, you need to, pass the NAVLE if you plan on practicing in some entity, and then go live your best life, I agree with you. I don't think it's completely correlated. At least I kind of fit that. So,
yeah. But how on earth, like I was reading through your bio and I just don't even understand. I mean, like, of course your grades weren't great because you were doing all these other things. I didn't even understand how you were capable. Like when you were working for the Office of Undergraduate Admissions as a graduate assistant, and
right.
you were coordinating tours and working at the visitor center and working
right.
on and plus being a student representative for, Elanco and Novartis, like how on earth did you balance that with all of the responsibilities of being a vet student?
That's a great question. I don't really know. I was just one of those people, like I said, after first year, I realized that I could not successfully devote all of my energy to school. And there were several of my classmates and several peers in other classes who worked in Aldi. They worked in grocery stores. They stocked shelves. They worked in the vet practices on the weekends. And I was like, well, of course they do. Like that makes total sense. That gives them like kind of an outlet. So the term graduate assistant, I want to use that loosely because I was a graduate assistant, but not in the traditional sense. It was really nice because my supervisor in the Office of Admissions, I worked with her in undergrad as well. I was a campus tour guide or an ambassador. And so I worked closely with her. So she knew like my work ethic, the kind of person I was, the fact that I really liked working with students, in this capacity. And so what I did was very much the behind the scenes work. On the weekends, I would spend a couple of hours doing emails. I would go into the office and process timesheets for the ambassadors. I would, like I said, do a lot of emailing, coordinating with them during weekly meetings. Sometimes I was there, sometimes I wasn't because I had to study. I really made it work. And I think that was another good thing that I did just because it gave me a lot of perspective and it kind of gave me a breath from the grind of being in lecture and doing exams. And I definitely acknowledge that is certainly not for everyone. And I had to make a lot of sacrifices in order to do that job. And I'm glad that I did, but in terms of time, I didn't have a lot of it. So,
I'm wondering if perhaps it gave you some social support too.
Oh yeah, 100%. And I was doing something that I was good at. Does that make sense?
It bolstered your self-esteem, despite the fact that you felt like you weren't doing as well as your classmates.
Right. I was like, I'm going to own up to the fact that I'm an average or even below average student. I'm going to do well enough. Yes, veterinary student. And I know where I bloom. I know where I do well. So I'm going to make sure that I don't necessarily 100% believe in the idea of complete work-life balance. I think that it's kind of ebbs and flows. And in vet school, I think you'll agree with me. It's a lot of work.
Oh my God.
it's a lot
totally. I mean, I just don't even understand how you were able to do this. I feel like if I had attempted to do that, I just would have failed out. So it's amazing, but really interesting that the reason that you did it was to give yourself, some joy.
Yeah, exactly.
To be able
You nailed
to do
it.
something you felt good about, you felt good at. And that gave you some balance to the rigors of vet school, which can really drag you down. I mean, day after day, week after week, month after month, it can wear you down. So maybe
it gave me joy, it gave me perspective.
Yeah, perspective, exactly. And then I wanted to ask you about, being serving that 2-year term as a veterinary economics officer. So that you started that I think it was the last year of vet school, right? And
so the way it works with SAVMA, I'm not sure. I know that you have interviewed Matt Holland, who was a SAVMA president. He's a good friend of mine. So you can be elected as a SAVMA delegate starting in your first year, and that's a 2-year term. And then from that House of Delegates, from that pool of people, which it's 2 individuals from each veterinary college, they elect an executive board. So there's different positions. There's the president and the treasurer or the secretary. And then there's a couple others that are kind of more focused on big veterinary disciplines or subsets, such as the veterinary economics officer, global public health officer, that kind of thing. So the VEO, veterinary economics officer, is technically a 2-year term. 1 year you serve as the elect position, and then in my 4th year I was the VEO.
So, and I would like to spend some time talking about this, because it sounds like you've got a really broad and deep perspective on some of the discussions that are going around about economics concerning veterinarians.
Absolutely.
And this, the struggle with the rising tuition and the rising interest rates. And I love that article, by the way, in DVM 360. I thought it was incredibly insightful because of the article. I mean, I'll post a link to it in the show notes as well. But what I loved about the article is for you to have compared like other people in the United States who are making about the same amount of money as a veterinarian. Mm-hmm. How are they living?
Right.
Compared to how is a veterinarian living, despite the fact that they have the same amount of income?
Exactly.
And because of the enormous student loan debt, one of the big areas of the veterinarian's life that was negatively affected was in recreation.
Right. Which is important.
It's so important. Like more important than I think it is for most other professionals,
Absolutely.
Get away from it. Just like you getting away from vet school.
Right.
By working in that position.
Right. I have to agree with you. And it was just fascinating. Veterinarians take fewer vacations, which I think across the board is not good. And I'm sure there's a lot of different reasons for that, financial being a big one. Mm-hmm. But then, are they able to step away from the practice? Do they own the practice? Do they have the ability to take the time off? If they take the time off, my bigger question is, having worked in practice, does the workplace have the ability to cover them? Anytime I missed a day, whether I was sick or whatever, I always had this guilt feeling of, okay, well, it's not like they're just going to have somebody swoop in to take my place unless one of my colleagues was able to come in on their day off. And that makes it even feel even worse.
Oh, yeah.
So I think that was kind of a fascinating way to look at it. And I have to give a lot of credit to the co-author, Ross Nippenberg. He's no longer with the AVMA. He took another position last year, but he was phenomenal and so fun to work with. I'm so thankful for that externship opportunity and the fact that we were able to get that article out there. But it was just kind of an idea we tossed around, and then we put the data together, and it was a really fascinating look at some of the bigger sacrifices that veterinarians make. And I think now that I'm in this academic position in a veterinary college, especially a new veterinary college that is private nonprofit, and our tuition is the same across the board for every student. We don't have resident or non-resident tuition. It's definitely really interesting to see from our perspective, and then from other veterinary colleges' perspective, because state funding is just not what it used to be. Their tuition dollars are required to keep doors open, and that burden falls directly on the student's shoulders.
Right.
And I'm not saying whether or not that's right or wrong, it's just the fact. And at the end of the day, we also need to recognize that this is affecting every professional profession, right? My boyfriend's an attorney. Same thing with his peers. They are facing huge student debt load. So I'm just looking forward. I'm going to be curious to see what happens, especially with the public service loan forgiveness. Currently, that's kind of up in the air as to whether or not that program will continue. And there's a lot of veterinarians who depend on that. Right. So it's just, I don't necessarily have a lot of really prophetic things to say about economics. It's just something I pay close attention to. And I think we need to continue to work toward creative solutions.
Well, let me ask you this, because you talked about the loan forgiveness program, and that is, so that's a specific program where if you work in an area that's underserved, right? Or in public service, and then after 10 years, your loan is forgiven. Right?
Yeah, essentially. There's another program called this is another long title, long acronym, Veterinary Medicine Loan Repayment Act. And they're trying to get an extension such that the money won't be impacted as much by taxes. But that one also is for veterinarians who work in underserved areas.
Okay.
So there are options. It's just anything with the federal government is not necessarily a guarantee.
Right. That's what I wanted to ask you. So my understanding has been that people have been, they thought they were enrolled in this program.
Right.
And they thought they were on track, and, maybe they're 8 years in or whatever. And they thought that all their ducks were lined up. And then they were told, oh, actually, your job doesn't qualify for this program, or you didn't sign the appropriate paperwork or something like that. So
right.
That the gist of the problem is that people need to be, for people going forward, if they're looking at these programs, like, how can they ensure that they're actually in the right program?
Absolutely. I think that's a great question. Unfortunately, I don't know that I have the answer for that. I encourage anyone, students, my classmates that I went to vet school with, my peers. I know that I have a plan A, a plan B, a plan C, whenever it comes to my loan repayment. And I think that's important, especially for the audience that we're, hoping listens to these podcasts, is that you walk in with eyes wide open about not only the debt load, but what are your options for paying it back? Your plans for being an Army veterinarian may not work out. What then? Your plan to do the pay as you earn program, which is another government income-based repayment option that may or may not be available by the time you graduate. So, and I don't want to be a Debbie Downer, but just knowing your options and choosing the best one for you is important. And something that I've been kind of diving into lately is looking at other individuals and professionals, and the social media communities that have to do with debt and paying off debt. So if you go on Instagram right now and you search the hashtag debt-free community, you can follow that hashtag. And a lot of these individuals are stewards of the Dave Ramsey Financial Peace University program.
Right.
But I have been following that hashtag for a little while, not necessarily because I have the ability to follow that doctrine completely, but it is fascinating. And it's truly, it's honest to goodness, a community that these people have formed, and they are paying off massive amounts of debt kind of together. And I'm just really fascinated by it.
Wow. So they're inspiring each other.
Yes, 100%. They're inspiring each other. They're empowering each other.
Yeah, it's like I don't know. It's like a group of people that you exercise with.
No, exactly. And something that we talk a lot about here at LMU and the dean talks about is, don't accept the status quo, right? Like, don't just accept like, oh, well, I'm going to have loans forever. Like, I have this debt load and it is what it is. And I'm just going to accept it because everybody else does. Well, maybe, keeping up with the Joneses is not the right way to go. Maybe you live really simply and adjust your standard of living for X amount of time. And, down the road, you're much better off.
Much better off. Oh my gosh.
So it's just, again, it's not necessarily something that I'm not trying to preach. I'm just saying that there are communities of individuals who are all over the country, all over the world, who are experiencing similar economic issues as veterinarians, and they're finding creative ways to pay off that debt. So let's kind of rally together and see if we can get creative too.
Yeah, great. And I'm going to look into that hashtag on Instagram.
Yeah. Hashtag debt-free community. Like I said, it's just something that I follow and it's interesting.
That's so great though. I mean, because I think that's what's going to be necessary is being open to getting ideas from completely unrelated, industries,
Yes.
Other people are struggling with it and they may come up with different ideas and be like, oh, I didn't think of that. So
absolutely.
That's fantastic.
Absolutely.
And so when you graduated and you started working in private practice, tell me about how that transition felt to you.
Yeah, I would love to. I talk about this a lot. So graduated and moved to a private practice in Houston, Texas. It was privately owned, not a corporate practice. And I loved the team there. I loved my clients. I had a kind of a fantastic mix of your traditional kind of suburban clients and then your non-traditional pet owners. And I tell any person who asks me that the first 3 months out are just brutal. And I don't say that to be negative. I just realistically, I feel like that the first 3 months, you're just kind of getting your legs under you and seeing things regularly. I was listening to one of your podcasts earlier and you made mention of one of the first times you saw like an anal sacculitis. An anal sac, abscess or whatever.
Yeah.
And I had a similar situation where I had one of my first couple weeks, had a boxer come in with just pretty straightforward, abscess or sacculitis or something. And I was just like, what do you do? What do I do with my hands?
I can still feel it in my body, like that feeling of freaking out. Like I'm the doctor and I don't know what to do.
Right. And thankfully my practice owner, was patient with me and he just kind of chuckled and he was like, well, I think that this is a pretty straightforward, anti-inflammatories, antibiotics, and, check it out, kind of treat it as a wound, figure out if you need to, express it or not express it, but flush the abscess, that kind of thing. And, the poor dog was so painful, obviously. And then I saw it a week later for a recheck and the owner was just happy as could be because their dog was fine. And I was like, okay, I fixed this. This is fine. So I think that like I tell people, the first 3 months, you need to have your classmates and some mentors on a speed dial or text message. Hopefully you have a good amount of mentorship, and I learned a lot from several associates at my practice, most notably my friend Nicole, who graduated a year before I did. So she graduated in 2015. And she was just phenomenal because she just really empowered me to do things that I probably would not have done if she hadn't been there. We didn't go to the same vet school, but she graduated a year before I did.
Okay.
And talking to her was a big reason that I went to this practice because I knew we would get along, And she was just like, yeah, do it. Go for it. You can do this all the time. And we were a really good support system for each other because she was still, learning. She was certainly still a recent grad. So I think that the first 3 months of seeing appointments, we were a very busy practice, working up the ear infections, the vomiting dogs, that kind of thing. I think it just takes time and repetition. And then after that, it gets more fun. That's just the bottom line. At least it was for me. Maybe not for everybody else, but it gets more fun.
So you felt like you had good mentorship right out of school.
I did, in a variety of ways. My practice owner was extremely busy, had a very loyal client base for the best reasons. He was a great doctor and practiced good medicine. So I called it kind of like drive-by mentorship with him. He would absolutely sit down with me and talk about a case with me, but it would usually be, he would be like typing up his soap, and I would be like listing, kind of presenting a case to him and being like, this is kind of what I'm thinking. And he'd be like, okay, well, maybe try this or do this or call this person, call this specialist, whatever. So with him, it was a lot of that, which is what I needed. I didn't really want hand holding. That's not what I wanted at all. And then the other associate vets there, we kind of did the same thing. We were like, hey, like, what would you do? And I'm about to call this client and present options. And I think that we did a really good job just because we did a lot of follow-ups. I was constantly on the phone, which this generation is not great at. I still don't love talking on the phone. I'm sure you know how that is.
Just send a text.
Exactly. No. And talking to people, checking in with them, really builds that rapport and makes all the difference. So for any new veterinarian who's about to graduate, or any pre-vet, write that down, make a note of that. People want to know that they're cared about. People want to know that you will follow up with them and remember them. And that made all the difference in my first year.
Yeah, that's a great tip. And so how did you end up moving from private practice into being the assistant dean of student success at Lincoln Memorial?
That's a phenomenal question. I'm still trying to figure that out.
How did that happen?
So, my friends, my peers will tell you that whenever I was in vet school, and this kind of goes back to all that varied experience that I got, I was kind of all over the place in terms of what I wanted to do. At one point, I thought I would go into like public health epidemiology, which is hilarious to me now. Like, no way. My personality type would not do well there. At one point, I thought that I was just going to immediately matriculate into a full-time MBA program, which would have been financially a terrible decision. But I was just like, I think this is great. This will like add to my options. Why not? Because at that time, UT didn't have a dual MBA DVM program like Dr. Will went through at Texas A&M. So I was like, I'll blaze that trail. I'll be the first UT vet student to go through that program. That did not pan out, thank God. I considered applying for the congressional fellowship in DC. I was just kind of all over the place. That I came back to the fact that I needed to practice to determine if that was something that I loved enough that I would want to pursue ownership. With my personality, I need to have ownership of what I do.
Oh, I love that.
Right?
That's the key to happiness.
It does. You need to make it your baby. It needs to be your thing. So I was like, okay, I think that this is my path. I'm going to dive right in and go into practice. I don't want to do an internship. I never really had the desire to do a specialty. The technicians down at on the clinics would tell me all the time, like, oh, you're a great student. You'd be such a good intern. You'd be such a good intern. I'm like, well, thank you. I take that as a compliment. However, I think that maybe you're saying that from your perspective because you would want to work with me, not because you think that's the best thing for me. So I kind of knew all along. I was like, I would really enjoy working with students in some capacity. I really enjoy working with veterinary students, and I became an unofficial mentor, an informal mentor to so many students who were in the classes below me. They would, reach out to me, text me, come find me, talk to me about an exam coming up. And I think that just comes back to the fact that I'm overly approachable. I'm easy to get to know. I'm easy to talk to, for better or for worse. And so I thought it would be awesome if I could do this in a job every day. I could work and empower vet students to kind of silence their doubts, not give so much power to the doubts that they have. Because we are very careful, cautious people. We move forward and we work so hard, and we have our dreams and our goals set on something. And if the sales move in one way or another, we get caught up in that, right?
Mm-hmm.
I know I did. So I went into practice and kind of said, okay, I'm going to keep my doors open, keep my options open. And the mentors that I had in the veterinary profession, some of them work for the AVMA, some of them are in private practice. I went to the Veterinary Leadership Experience in 2016, which is a really awesome week-long program out in Idaho, which was phenomenal, super duper impactful for me, and kind of made me realize that in the long term, I might not be a practitioner forever. I may not decide to own a practice. Mm-hmm. I definitely don't want to be an associate veterinarian forever. So I just kept my doors open, and I tell anyone who asks, because obviously I'm very young in this position, and I acknowledge that. I openly, joke about it. It is what it is, right? I'm a non-traditional administrator. It's strange, but it's great. That if this job had opened 1 year after I graduated, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, I would have still been interested in it. I'm just so lucky that they, interviewed me and other people and chose me. I'm beyond thankful for that. It just kind of came at the right time. And I think in this position, I have the right mix of some clinical practice experience, though it's limited. I was in practice for the year. And I also have taken an athlete in the last 5 years. I think that adds to my my list of things that makes me more relatable to students. Mm-hmm. And what they're going through, I very much remember it. I went to veterinary school when social media was a thing. I know what it's like to have those distractions, and social media adds a whole different element to what they're going through, right? And there's Facebook pages for your vet school class, and there's groups, and I know what that's like. So I try to really not take that for granted in my job, and try to convey to students, like, yes, I'm Dr. Johnson, but I also have been in your shoes not that long ago. So let's figure out the best way to help you, because I know all too well how it feels to struggle.
Yes. And, it's so true. Like, I talk to veterinarians all the time who've been out, 1, 2, 3 decades, and it gets harder and harder to remember what it was like in veterinary school. And,
right.
A lot of experienced practitioners, if they hire a new graduate, sometimes they're not all that sympathetic because they don't remember how hard it was. It was so long ago, they don't even remember.
Exactly.
So it makes total sense for you to be there.
Right. I heard I'm a big fan of podcasts. I'm not just saying that because I'm on a podcast, but I listen to a lot of podcasts. Like I said, I have a little bit of a drive to get to work, so I listen to a lot of them. And there is a phenomenal series called "How I Built This" with Guy Raz through NPR, and there is basically they interview founders and CEOs of companies, like startups, if you will.
Right. Yeah.
And they interviewed the 2 guys who came up with the idea for Airbnb. And they talked a lot about one of the things that really helped them in growing their company was this idea of experiential empathy. They would go into the homes of the hosts, and they would evaluate the operating system from the host's point of view. And then they would do the same from the guest's perspective. They would go and they would look at how easy is it for them to book a place to stay in advance, or really short term, that kind of thing. So I throw around the term experiential empathy because I learned that on that podcast, because that's literally, it's what I do. I have that experiential empathy because I've very recently been in their shoes. Most veterinary administrators are DVM, so they have as well, just not as recently. And it also helps because I'm not board certified. I don't have additional degrees behind my name. I just feel like that, again, makes me more relatable. And for the LMU mission, at least we want to produce competent, confident veterinarians. It's important. And I think that what I do is important, and working with the students is just the most fun job ever. I love it.
Oh, it sounds great. Yeah. And can you tell me, like, I don't know if all of your days are the same. I suspect they probably aren't, but just give me a general overview of what a day in your working life is like. What do you do?
You're absolutely correct in that every day is different. And that's one of the reasons I love it. That's one of the things I think I missed a little bit whenever I was in practice. You kind of get in the routine of saying the same things, the same kind of client education spiels. And I say the same things to certain students, but every student is different. But at the core of what I do in this position is I'm the primary student administration contact. So if a student has a question, a concern, they are struggling with something, their grandmother dies, their parents are ill, that kind of thing, which, as I told you before, I've been through personally. They know to come directly to me, and we'll figure out what they need to do, whether I triage them to another resource, or they're just like, hey, I just want to tell you that this is going on. And I'm like, okay, cool. Well, do you want me to follow up with you? Would you like me to put you in contact with our mental health counseling staff? How do you want to move forward? And how can I make sure that this doesn't become a bigger issue? That's at the very core of what I do. I also work with students who are on academic probation from the previous semester. I work closely with students who maybe are not performing as well in the current semester, make sure that there's not something else going on. I'm the dean and my immediate executive associate dean. They just consider me someone who serves as an accountability partner to the students to make sure that nobody falls through the cracks. So I take that really seriously, and I love that aspect of what I do. Another part of what I do is I oversee our NAVLE initiatives. So NAVLE, for those of you who are listening, is the North American Veterinary Licensing Examination. It's the big, bad board exam during your fourth year. So at LMU, we have a NAVLE prep rotation. That's really, really neat. It's 4 weeks that you can do just sort of similarly as a clinical rotation. And then we have a 3-week block during the testing window in the fall that the students don't have any rotations. It's just 3 weeks that is designed for them to study and really buckle down and kind of prepare review topics for the NAVLE, which is really unique. I don't know of any other college that has that. I certainly did not.
I didn't have that.
I don't know how it was for you, but I think that we started clinics and they're like, all right, well, make sure you register for the NAVLE and pass the NAVLE and have a good time. Go.
Exactly.
You know,
your Zuka review questions every day.
Right. Exactly. Zuka review, vet prep, the whole thing.
Yeah.
So I oversee those initiatives, making sure that students have the correct resources available to them, which is really, really neat. Again, because I took it recently. I know how hard that exam is. I work closely with our professional skills program. So at LMU, we have from the first semester, it's clinical and professional skills are really stressed here. So that is actually a whole course every semester that they take. And the professional skills coursework is heavy on communication. So communication training. We have simulated clients. We have actors, individuals from the community come in and they work with students on their client interactions. And we go from very basic initial wellness puppy visits to clients who are angry and crying and irate at you for something that may or may not be your fault in the 6th semester. So I help a lot with that program because I love client communication and the impact that has on these folks as they go into practice.
Oh God, a huge impact. Yeah. I'm so happy to hear that you guys have such an emphasis on it. We had
huge emphasis.
One session where it was like an actor pretending to be upset. I had one. So you guys are doing it every single semester.
Every semester.
Lots of different sscenarios. How
exactly.
Fantastic.
It's great. And I think that some students really value it. Others are kind of like, I have better things to do. So they think. So I just try to make sure to encourage them to really engage and buy in and participate. And they really appreciate it. it's interesting too, because our inaugural classes in their clinical rotations currently, and they're kind of like, hey, that was really valuable. I'm glad that we had that provided.
That's funny. So some of the students, these are the soft skills, communication, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
It's like taking a sociology class. Like,
Right.
please, I have other things to do.
Right.
They don't recognize the value of it right now. Right.
Most do. It's
do.
just, how do you give them the perspective that we have, having worked with clients of all different types and varieties and levels of emotion. I know that you, having worked in emergency medicine, probably saw that more than I did. So it's just the skills that they learn and the practice that they get is invaluable. So I work with them as well. And I love that. And I help every now and then with clinical skills labs, which is a lot of fun, just trying to keep my hands dirty in that. And our third year surgery labs, the spay neuters, and that's always fun because I don't know about you, but whenever I was in vet school, surgery was just terrifying.
Oh my God.
And I didn't like it.
Oh, I was terrified all the time.
Yeah.
One of the surgery professors, I remember him making a comment about vet students. He's like, anytime I ever say anything to any of you, it's like, stop, drop, and roll.
Exactly.
All like,
it's like they get like the dinosaur hands. They're like, I don't know what to do. And, or the T-Rex hands. So I try to, whenever I was in practice, I fell in love with surgery. The surgeries that we did were fairly routine. I did do an FHO on a cat once. That was interesting.
Ooh.
Yeah. Oof, that's a different story for a different time. But I try to help them. For example, on Valentine's Day, I was helping with 6 surgery groups. So 3 in the morning and 3 in the afternoon. And they were all neuters, all male dogs. And I was just trying to, lighten the mood a little bit. I was like, hey, we're going to neuter some dogs on Valentine's Day. Let's go, trying to make them laugh and enjoy it. And at the end of the day, I think they all had, really good experience, and just trying to find the enjoyment and the creativity in surgery early on, I think is helpful.
Right. I mean, it's a very fine balance between, obviously, you want students to gain competence, and we want competent doctors. And to be a competent doctor, you do have to work hard. You do have to study hard. But at the same time, we need, not to feel so scared and terrified and intimidated all the time, too. So
Exactly.
that sounds like a really good atmosphere to learn in.
For sure. I think it's great, and it's different than what I went through, although I had a great experience as well with my surgery labs at UT. So I think it's just important to stress to these guys that every practice day that you have whenever you're in vet school, whether or not it goes well, whether or not there's complications, the learning is what is important. Perfection is not important.
Perfection is impossible.
Yeah.
So
with medicine.
So in your position, what are you doing to prepare your students for the future in terms of their mental and emotional well-being? And what are your views on what's going on in veterinary medicine with the high rates of depression? And
yeah, I think that's a phenomenal question. I've been actually pondering on that a lot lately, because the very essence of my position is am I helping them? Am I walking alongside them? And that's something I'm still new, and I'm actively trying to figure out. But at the end of the day, I want everyone in veterinary medicine, and especially these students, to understand that you're not helpless. You have the ability to kind of reach out a hand and say, I need help. I'm struggling with this case. I'm struggling with this issue. I have this personal situation. And at the end of the day, as I said earlier, I think every individual can benefit from counseling at some point or another. I don't know if you agree with that.
I do. I think you should start immediately after graduating vet school. I don't care how great you feel.
Yeah, I just there's a video that I think of about these two guys that are on an escalator. And in the middle of the escalator ride, the escalator stops. And they both start yelling, "Help, help, we need help." And it's kind of a parody on like, hey, you're on an escalator. It turns into stairs. You can move up the stairs, right? So just knowing when you're able to help yourselves versus when you need to ask for help, I feel like is so important. And something that we also have been talking a lot in terms of the future of veterinary medicine and prospective students and pre-vet students is, what is your identity outside of this?
That's huge.
Right?
So huge.
Like, is it something big? Are you a musician at heart? Are you an engineer? Are you a tried and true animal lover? And then on the side, you are really good at making tacos and you want to open a taco truck. Like, I don't know. I've got tacos on the brain because I was just in Houston and I ate at Torchy's and I love tacos. But anyway, I just feel like we need to put more emphasis on the identity of these individuals and ensuring that they have one, that it's not just veterinary medicine is all consuming.
Oh my
because
gosh.
That's where you get individuals who become jaded
and depressed and burned out
and depressed and burned out. And this profession alone can't give you everything you need in life.
Oh my God.
It just can't. So
it's really interesting though, Dr. Johnson, because most of the people that I talk to, they've wanted to be veterinarians since they were like 5.
Absolutely. So, I'm not discounting that.
Oh no. But, I'm agreeing with you. Absolutely.
Right.
But that's what needs to change. Like, okay, all of your life, that's what you've wanted. You've wanted to become a veterinarian and you go through undergrad and now you're in vet school and oh my gosh. And you believe that it's going to be everything that you need and that you'll never need anything else.
Absolutely.
That's what I thought. I thought before vet school that I would be 100% fulfilled by being a veterinarian.
Right.
And
you went all in. Yeah. And I think that especially in my experience, my first year, I tried to go all in and I got burned. I quickly established, okay, this can't be everything I stand for. This can't be everything I work for and do. I will quickly fall to the wayside. So, what is your identity? Does that mean that you, in my case, go back to working with students, go back to what you know, and talking to the general public about something that you really enjoy? Or again, does that mean that you join a choir or a symphony? Or I just encourage everyone in this profession, especially support staff members, veterinary technicians, everyone. What brings you that joy outside of what we do every day? Is it just something as simple as going on a hike with your dog? That's restorative for me. I want us to establish those things, the joy points, the identity outside of what we do.
That's fantastic. Well, I think we're coming to the end of the interview. Have I neglected to ask you anything that you wanted to talk about?
Can I ask you a question?
Oh, of course.
Perfect. What would be one thing that you would say to a younger version of yourself? And you can pick the time frame.
You mean about being a veterinarian?
Anything. Yeah. What would you say to the young Dr. K before she started vet school or before she even knew that she wanted to go to vet school?
I might say, go to human medical school instead. Because, like the money that is very much lacking in veterinary medicine. But I think that's just about the money. Because what I do love about being a veterinarian is being able to do all those different things and the variety. I love that. And I do miss clinical practice. And I've been I've been trying to find a job in Flagstaff, but I don't want
Is
to work.
the market not great, or is it just they want people who are full time?
It's not really, it's very different from where I came from. So I
Okay.
came from Chicago.
Right.
I did dogs and cats, and there were specialists in every direction. And here it's semi-rural. And
Oh, okay.
yeah, so like there's a donkey pen in the behind the vet hospital that's
Oh, cool.
down the street from our house. And
But not something that really interests you.
no, it isn't. I mean, my thing is really I want to be good at practicing really high quality medicine on dogs and cats. So I
Right.
feel like I might need to, I don't know, pick up relief shifts in Phoenix or something like that.
Yeah.
So
Sure.
I'm still looking at different options, but I do miss clinical practice. And I think have you heard of the concept of intermittent reinforcement?
No.
It's a psychology term, and they found that the best way, and this is why gamblers get addicted, right?
Okay.
Because they'll play and they'll lose and they'll lose and then they'll win. Oh my God. And then they'll lose and then lose and lose and win. And it's like unpredictable reward, like unpredictable intervals of reward is what
Right.
gets you addicted.
Right.
And honestly, like I feel like that about clinical practice, because
Yeah.
when you have a good day or a good save or a super interesting case that you're able to solve, it is the most amazing feeling in the world.
Absolutely.
And, so
And
that's,
the bad days kind of bring you down. They destroy you a
they
little
bring
bit.
you down a lot.
Yeah.
And you're so isolated too, you're not part of a bigger community. And I think that that's something that helps you to thrive is because you're a part of this huge community. And when you go into clinical practice, your world shrinks quite considerably,
Yeah. I
And
would agree with that. But isn't that issue as simple as someone creating a hashtag or starting a community, igniting something? We're saying, okay, look, how many veterinary practices are there within X square miles, and what can we do to support one another and rally around each other so that there is less burnout and we are helping
More
build each other up.
Absolutely.
Feel more connected.
That's one of the things that I recommend to new graduates is like reach out to other new graduates in your area. If there's nobody in your area, then set up like Skype, group chat, something, a regular thing so that you have a community.
Right.
I didn't even know that it was, going to be important.
Right.
So
it is. And even just listening to your podcasts and hearing these people who you've interviewed, Will, who lives in DC now, Matt, who is a congressional fellow and has this, unique perspective and these unique goals that he's, set for himself. The relief veterinarian, who's a close friend of yours. I'm sorry, I can't remember her name.
Dr. Kramer.
And then the Army veterinarian. It's nice for me because that makes me feel a little bit less like I'm walking this alone, right? I'm definitely doing something different, and I get questioned on that a lot, and that's fine. I can talk about what I do all day long and why it matters and why it's important. But the community, in the sense that you're not alone, is something that we need to evaluate and hopefully rally around as a profession.
Yeah. And part of it, imposter syndrome stands in the way of that. Like you said, when you first started vet school, that was the experience when I first started vet school. It was absolutely the problem when I first started practicing, just feeling like I don't think I'm good enough or smart enough to do this. And I don't want anybody to know that, So I think that having conversations like this and making them available to future vets or vet students hopefully will help them to understand that what they're thinking inside is what all of us are thinking and feeling inside.
Absolutely. We don't have it all figured out.
No.
I think most veterinarians will tell you that point blank. So just, I remember from Will's podcast, him, making the point of saying, if you're not happy doing what you're doing and you have the ability to be flexible in some way, I think he made mention of being like geographically flexible. If you can move and take a job that maybe you wouldn't then do it, go for it. I would not have applied for this job had it not been for individuals who told me, like, you're perfect for it. Do it. Apply. The worst they can say is no. I also think it's worth mentioning that studies show that women tend not to apply for jobs if they don't fit every qualification, whereas men will gladly apply for jobs even if they don't have all the qualifications. So I think that in applying for this job, I fit the absolute recommendations. Like they said, you have to be a veterinarian, but then they also I think it was also a suggestion, if you had a master's of education, that would be nice, or, other things. And women tend to be like, oh, well, I don't have that.
Right.
I couldn't possibly apply for a job if I don't have something they're looking for. It doesn't matter. At the end of the day, if they interview you and they like you or they don't, or they like what you have to offer or they don't, or they think that you're a good match, whether that be in a private practice, whether that be in a non-clinical job, it at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. Either you fit or you don't. So go for it.
Go for it. And even if you don't get the job, you'll learn something from the interview. You'll have met somebody.
Absolutely.
And who knows? Like Dr.
So
McCauley, he didn't get the first job that he applied for at AHI, but they remembered him and they called him the next time a position came up.
Yep. Exactly. So I feel like that happens all the time. So I just encourage everyone to do what scares you. Go for it.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
The other thing, Dr. Johnson, that I've talked about with some of my other veterinary friends is what happens in veterinary school. You've got your classmates and your professors and the administrators. So you do have a community, but everything is so clear. Like, oh, now I'm going to take this class, and then I'm going to take that class, and then I'm going to go to this semester and take that lab and this class, and then I'm going to be in clinical rotations. And for 3 weeks, I'll be here. For 3 weeks, I'll be there. And then you graduate, and boom, there's no structure. There's nothing at all. And that's a little bit disoriented. Like, okay, now it's completely up to me, and nobody's going to be telling me this is the next step that you take, and this is the infrastructure that you're working within. It's completely up to you to create.
So I think going back to that point is just don't live your life like a checklist. I have goals, have big goals, have small goals. I have a little bullet journal, which those are very trendy right now. I'm not sure if you're aware, but bullet journals, they're abbreviated BUJOs, BUJO, bullet journals. And people will go on there and put their schedules, and it's kind of like a more flexible weekly planner, weekly calendar. And so get one of those and write out your short-term goals, your long-term goals, financial, physical, social, all of that. And use that as an accountability for you. If you're used to having your clinical schedule and your class schedule and your lab schedule, and then you graduate and you don't have that anymore, well, create structure within your life based off of your goals.
That's great.
I know I say that like I'm really good at it. I'm working on it.
We're all working on it.
Right. But I completely understand what you're saying. And honestly, again, my personality type is not typical for most veterinarians. For anybody who cares, I'm a Myers-Briggs ENFP.
I knew you were an extrovert, and know about the rest of it, but for sure.
Right. So most veterinarians, especially for that last one, P versus J being someone who really likes structure, deadlines, that kind of thing. Yeah. I gravitate more toward the other side, which is a daily struggle for me, especially in academia. But just kind of knowing, okay, well, whenever I graduated, I was like, cool. No more
structure.
No more milestones and structure. Like I get to write the rules now, and I love that. It's difficult, and I have to kind of create some structure within my day and my week. But just create what you need in your day to day, and go with it. Live your best life and do what scares you.
All right. Well, and wrapping up, is there a favorite charity that you have that you'd like to tell listeners about that they can consider donating to thank you for all of your time and advice?
Absolutely. So there is a program. It's actually quite large now. It's called It's actually called Remote Area Medical. So it's a volunteer core program. Their mission is to prevent pain and alleviate suffering by providing free quality health care to those in need. I love these individuals and what they do. They host clinics all over the country, internationally. My dog Gunner, he does animal assisted therapy. So we go to nursing homes and schools and we volunteer at these clinics for these individuals who are waiting in line for these services. And a lot of times they've been waiting in line through the night, just because they need this care. It's dental care, vision, they need glasses, they can get it there. If they need to consult with the internist, just people from every walk of life who don't have basic health care can get it for free, no questions asked, from this program. And it was really phenomenal for me because they're the individuals who were waiting in line, especially in the dentistry area. They were waiting to go and be seen by a dentist and anticipating what was likely to be a somewhat painful procedure. And just having Gunner, my dog, there with them just kind of put them at ease. But it is so well organized, and they have a strong group of medical professionals who serve. They have veterinary clinics. They have, like I said, dentistry, vision, medical. It's incredible. It's an incredible effort to see and take part in. So that is something that I encourage anyone and everyone, if you have any interest in healthcare and access to healthcare, this is a really, really great opportunity for you to give to those who need it most. So.
Yeah, and thank you so much for telling me about that. I'd never heard of it.
Right. And I love that the mission is to prevent pain and alleviate suffering. Like, isn't that like exactly like our oath? It's phenomenal.
Yes. And I mean, it's really good. I think to give some of us perspective, because when we get out of veterinary school and we can't take the fancy vacations or buy the fancy cars that our neighbors who are making the same amount as we are taking and buying, right? And we can feel a little sorry for ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Go to one of these things, and see these people that they can't even, afford to see a dentist. It puts things into perspective. Like,
absolutely.
Yeah, I'm doing okay.
Yeah, exactly. I think I told you several times that I'm a big picture person, and there's so many times during my day, just overall, where I zoom out and look at things from a spiritual point of view, all of that, and I just think we're all doing pretty good, all things considered, and the things that need to be addressed in our profession, I think that they can be. I think that nothing that we have to worry about at this point is impossible. So let's rally together and create those communities and do what scares us.
That's your motto. The Jedi Knight. Do what
the Jedi Knight. Exactly. I was wondering if that was going to come up.
The Jedi Knight. That's what your boss calls you.
That's right. Right. Which, whenever I took this job, to be clear, I'm ashamed to say this, I had never watched the Star Wars movies. I know. I'm sorry. I know. So over the Christmas holiday, my boyfriend and I watched pretty much all of the best episodes kind of in a row. I think we did 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and we went and saw the newest one. I think that's number 8.
Okay, so it's very confusing with the numbering. So did you start with the Luke Skywalker beginning, or did you start with the Anakin Skywalker beginning?
So we started with Luke Skywalker.
Oh, good. Okay, because I think that's the best way to watch it. If you start with Anakin Skywalker, then I don't think you're going to develop the love for it.
Exactly. That was his again, AJ's suggestion. And I'm so thankful because I love it.
Oh my God, AJ. He's so smart.
He is. He's a smart one. So thankful for watching that. And now I have perspective on the Jedi Knight and kind of the mentor role that the Jedi Knight plays in the whole thing. And
you got to keep those students from moving towards the dark side.
Exactly. It's literally it is my daily mission.
All right. Dr. Elizabeth Johnson, thank you so much for your time. I've had a blast talking to you.
Absolutely. Thank you. It's been a lot of fun. And yeah, thank you.